we were good enough to go to heaven or not, or all that stuff. So that whole area became incredible to me. And the other area, of course, was the issue of the existence of pain and suffering in the world. The fact that whatever it is, thousands of little, millions, I think it is, of little children die of nothing but starvation every year. And that there's a God somewhere, the churches believe, sitting up there watching this and doing nothing about it. And they have all kinds of, religious people have all kinds of answers to this about free will and all of that. But nonetheless, that is so incredible to me. And of course, they say that, well, all of that has caused by human beings at some stage, the greed and all of that. But there's no answer to natural disasters. Earthquakes, tsunamis, all these things that kill 5,000 and 10,000 people and leave 25 or 30,000. The Pakistan earthquake about 6 or 8 years ago left 250,000 people homeless and destitute. Now, who can you blame for that? All you can blame, as far as I'm concerned, the only thing you can blame for that is that it's a natural phenomenon, and that there's any God behind it. Well, if there's a God behind it, he's a malevolent God, and it has to be, to do that to people. So it's those kinds of issues that brought me around, and then I went on from there. Now, you get people saying, oh, well, atheists, if you're an atheist, you can't have a moral code. How do you? Which is a dreadful canard that is absolute nonsense. There were non-religious people or non-theists are very often as honourable and have as strong a moral code as people who claim to be Christian. I try to live by the Sermon on the Mount, the goodness of the Christian ethic, which I was brought up. Love and forgive, forgive 7 times 7, do good to those who despitefully use you. Now, these are not exclusively Christian either. They were in Greek ethics before, and they're not exclusively Christian, but they are what makes sense of the world for me. Try to make meaning and purpose of the world for me. And that's why with a group like yours, I was delighted to hear that you're supporting Cork Penny Dinners. I think a group like yours here, you obviously have all come to the conclusion about the abstract doctrinal kinds of issues, but it's the business of a contribution to society which authenticates ultimately a group like this. And that you are doing it is very important, I think. It's not just a talking shop, and it's not just a case of feeling, I don't believe this, and that's all negative. All we can salvage from the mystery of this creation and the human condition, I think, is to try and make coping with it easier for other people. I stop now, I've gone on far too long. I do believe very strongly at the top level of the separation of church and state. I was brought up, as I told you, in the 1940s, 50s and 60s in this country, up to Vatican II, when the power of the Catholic Church and religion, and in many ways within its own community, some of the Protestant denominations would have had some kind of control too. But on the state, the Catholic Church virtually had a veto on absolutely everything, if you remember the Noel Brown business and all of that. And the church and state should be absolutely separate. So that's about it. I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might like to ask. Don't be shy.
What's your... Sorry, what's your viewpoint on the issue of free will? I mean, considering that there is a lot of discussion in regard to people like Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris, to a degree Richard Dawkins, although he doesn't normally bother with free will as such, and others, including A.C. Grayling. So, from your perspective now that you've come from an institute which does believe in free will, how do you square with it now?
I always had a question about free will. And what I always said over the years was, we have definitely less free will than people imagine. Now, Sam Harris's last book, which I haven't read, have you read it?
Free will, very good.
You read it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't read it. Is entirely given over to this.
Yes.
And as I understand it, Sam Harris is saying virtually we have no free will.
Of a sort, yes.
Of a sort.
Yes.
And I'd be very close to that. I believe that, I don't know how much free will we have. I mean, in 2 minutes, am I free when nobody else has a question to sit down, or am I not free? Is it inevitable? Is that determined in some way by the context and all of that kind of thing? And the other thing is, of course, genetic patterning and imprinting and all of that means that we all have certain determined bases for what we believe are free judgments, which determine us in a certain way. I don't know enough about it, but I don't think we have very much free will.
I think it focuses a lot on the idea of the cause and effect of the universe. If everything it has cause and effect, then why would we be separate from that?
Oh yeah, oh that's interesting. Yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, as if ourself is somehow isolated from the rest of the universe.
Yeah, we do appear, however, to have free will.
Oh, that's the purpose of it, because we don't comprehend it.
People talk about choices. We make choices that determine patterns in our lives, but I really don't know. But I suspect we don't have very much free will.
Just on the question, I know you use atheist a lot, and you hardly use the word agnostic. Do you accept that there's a 0.000 chance that we haven't explained the Big Bang yet?
Well, as I said to you, I was agnostic up to a certain point. But atheism, as I understand it, and the atheism that I would claim to be part of, says, I believe there is no God. I do not know there is no God. But neither does any Christian or religious believer know that there is a God. They believe there is a God. I don't think it is possible for human beings to know. Know is a scientific concept, if you like, that you can actually do an experiment and you can prove something about the natural order. And then you know it. But I mean, again, that all becomes, with the scientific method, all of that becomes a bit problematical too, in a way, in that lots of things they go back. And I once talked to a fellow who's lecturing in UCD that I knew quite well, and he was in very bad form. And he said, I said, what's wrong with you? And he said, a paper has just been published that shows that the thesis of my PhD thesis is false. In other words, he was absolutely certain, he had done it, he had proved, and then somebody came out with new information and knew whatever and proved it false. So even science doesn't have it. But all I can say is I believe there is no God, and that's, I believe, what an atheist can say. Can't say I know there is no God.
It's the first time I've heard the distinction between believe and know.
Sorry?
That's the first time I've heard that distinction between the words believe.
Oh, right.
And know.
I've always struggled with that, and I think it's very important, the difference between believe and know.
Can I ask a question? You were chaplain, you said, in Mountjoy.
Yes.
I saw a program, The Meaning of Life, recently, which on...
Yes, I saw it.
On Game On. It's still available as far as I can see. And it looks like he's also a non-believer.
Yeah.
Because he was asked that question at the end.
I know John
He's a
Longer.
very kind
Yes.
man. And,
He's a wonderful, wonderful man. And when that program was
he was
finished...
the governor, wasn't he?
Yes, he was governor, and he was so accessible and so just to prisoners. I remember sitting in on, I was asked by the chief officer, whom I knew very well, he said, you'd learn quite a bit actually if you sit in with John Lonergan, and it was very easy, no problem to do it, he was glad. Where prisoners had an opportunity to come to the governor and ask for certain privileges and reliefs, and maybe even a day release or something like that. And it was amazing. This humanitarian attitude he had to prisoners, an immense sympathy for prisoners. and he dealt with them all individually as human beings in a very important way, but he was nobody's fool. There was not one of those prisoners who were going to get anything over on him. But he did it beautifully. And when that programme was finished with John Lonergan, with Gay Byrne, Hilary turned to me and she said, that could have been you. He was spot on all of the points he made that I agreed absolutely with. He's a wonderful man. Yeah.
This one was wondering, we were saying about guilt. Did you experience guilt yourself?
Very slightly, at a very early stage, I did. Very slightly. But nobody ever inculcated me with this kind of guilt as a child. As I said, in my family, they were very liberal. There was no ever question of going to hell or heaven or any of that thing. And my teachers, both in school and in Sunday school, they taught the Bible stories and the life of Jesus and that kind of thing, but there was no indoctrination, so I didn't really have. But I did, yes, I certainly had a touch of a feeling of guilt when in my 20s, early 20s, before I went on to the ministry. And it's only occurred to me now, it's gone. Anyway, I'll come back.
You were saying about the indoctrination
Yes.
of the religious things.
Yes.
And the child is exposed to molding. And I was just wondering, my question is, do you have an idea of, do you believe in the academic world, as in that academia is a way to mold children, or to pass on knowledge, or do you think there's something else? Is it just religion, as in when I was taught?
As in what?
In my school, we were just taught religion as a subject.
Yes.
And would you say that it should be still taught to kids that there are different types of religion from a historical point of view, or would you change the actual education system?
Yeah.
Kind of way?
Well, I think the thing that parents ought to teach children are ethical issues. Truth, honesty, forgiveness, love, all of the essentials that are part of the Sermon on the Mount and are common to all religions in theory, if you like. If you can teach a child, and human fallibility, that we all fail, we're all flawed, and that's what the Christian doctrine of original sin is about. And it's true, it's the only doctrine of the Christian church really that I subscribe to. We are all flawed, we're human, we have failings, and so on. And I think if you can teach children that, and to forgive and allow for other people, allow for diversity, those kind of things. I mean, one of the signs of maturity in people and in communities is that they can live with diversity. And the contrary is true. Not to be able to live with diversity and want conformity and uniformity from around you is a sign of immaturity. Those kind of things I would think should be taught to children. But the issue of validating religions, I would see the scientific answers make an awful lot of sense to me. And if you can teach children that, but then there's such a diversity of children. Many children are not academic, and you asked about academia. Many children are just not academic, and that's fine. I have a grandson, and he's 19 years of age, and he couldn't wait to get out of school because he's a good golfer. And he's now doing the greenkeeping course, and he's going to spend his life. But don't give him a book; he won't read it. You know, there's an immense diversity of people, and I think the thing about education is to draw, as the word itself, educo, to draw out, is to draw out the talents and abilities in all their diversity from everybody.